Well, good evening. What a privilege to be with you this evening and throughout this conference. While we continue to engage with each other and explore the prophetic voice of the church in our attempt to minister to God's creation. It's a privilege for me, and I bring you greetings from Cape Coast Diocese and from the church in Ghana and the province of West Africa. I didn't know. After my studies at King's College, I was rendered homeless. I remember very well Archbishop Okai when I was living at St. Matthew's House, Westminster, visited me and said, "How are you going home?" I said, "Well, Archbishop, I'm looking up to God." He said, "All right, we'll see." So he came back in the evening and said, "You know what? I want you to go to your Uspg office." It was at Partnership House in Waterloo. Go to your Uspg office and I've started a conversation. So just go and introduce yourself. That's how I got home. Thanks to Uspg, they managed to ship my books. Having spent 5 years at King's with all my books, they shipped that for me. And I'm privileged to be part of the ministry of Uspg. Friends, I have been asked to speak on the topic prophetic voice of the church, the African context. And let me begin by saying that I know for most of you, I have a different accent, and you might find it difficult in hearing me. So I'm going to talk slowly so that you'll be able to hear what I say and be able to assimilate the thoughts that I want to share with you. Friends, the African church, for me, needs a prophetic voice, to say the least. And this voice must come with a vision and a mission. Why am I saying this? Well, at the heart of the church's vocation is to understand that our Lord Jesus Christ sent the church into the world to proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God. The church needs to live in her everyday life the implications of following the mandate of Jesus Christ. Because, as N.T. Wright puts it, the question of Jesus, who he really was, what he really did, what he means, and why it matters, remains hugely important in every age, not only in personal life, but also in political life, not only in religion or spirituality, but also in culture, justice, beauty, ecology, friendship, scholarship, and sex, unquote. The prophetic voice of the church in Africa must possess three voices to be relevant. One, the voice of witness. Two, the voice of ministry and service. And three, the voice of leadership. The church in Africa must have a voice which has to blaze the trail and be a pathfinder in the very life of the African society. It must champion the cause of growth and development and be able to provide achievable solutions to Africa's problems. Let me take it one by one. The voice of witness. What do I mean by that? Friends, the struggle of African people after independence has been that of the establishment of genuine democratic principles. Democracy has come with its consequences, such as multi-party politics, freedom of speech, and the fight for human rights. The proliferation of churches, privatization of religion and religious life, secularization, and the adverse effect of globalization. For this reason, ladies and gentlemen, prophetic witness in Africa needs a new orientation based on education, reformation, and empowerment. The church's prophetic witness must remind the society of its responsibility towards God with a sense of commitment and responsible stewardship. The prophetic voice of the church must lead the crusade against social vices in the society. For example, injustice, discrimination, organized crime and corruption, mismanagement, moral decadence, religious intolerance, armed robbery, environmental pollution, etc., etc. Number 2, a voice of ministry. My brothers and sisters in the Lord, churches in most countries in sub-Saharan Africa has been involved in various kinds of ministry. The reason for this partly historical and partly due to several challenges that the church and the churches face. Provision of social services such as medical care and education by many Anglican churches in Africa was started through the missionary agencies such as Uspg and CMS from England and other American agencies during the colonial era. However, it can't be stated that most churches in the continent inherited the mission structures without the necessary resources to run them. The challenge of continuing to render services of basic needs like medical care, education, good drinking water, food to the people has come about due to the fact that there is great need of such services in our communities. The churches have to provide more basic amenities in support of livelihood of the people. For example, when the government is not able to provide communities with these basic needs, the churches become the next point of call. The proximity of the church to the people makes it difficult for the church not to be concerned. Under colonial government and administration, churches in Africa, at least in Ghana, received financial assistance from the so-called Mother Church through what was termed grants in aid to do mission under their management. So it was the colonial Mother Church concept bringing grants in aid to the African people was they were managing. telling them what to do with the grant and not what they want to do with the grant. It is interesting to note that there are few churches on our continent that still have that kind of agreement, and those remaining few have their financial grants cut considerably. Poverty in Africa presents challenge in unambiguous terms for the people on the continent. Accordingly, my friends, the quest for dignity depends on how successfully Africans manage to struggle out of the dehumanizing poverty that afflicts the majority of our people. Think about situations in North Africa where people crossing the Mediterranean to Europe are subjected to horrible activities. Again, think about people crossing the Sahara Desert on foot to Europe without food, water. Let me be honest with you. As I live in Cape Coast, and the cathedral, Christ Church Cathedral, Cape Coast, is just across the street from this slave castle. And I see a lot of people coming, where some are tourists, they just come for fun to look at this. Some come for educational purposes. Some come for mission purposes. But I must say that slavery may have ended on paper, but still slavery continues. Slavery continues. Look at the young girls and women sold into slavery. Look at young men sold into slavery. Why? What is the church doing? What are we called to do? Where is the prophetic voice of the church challenging the status quo, the powers that be? Africa will have to strengthen democratic institutions to ensure that its people live in freedom and peace under laws based on the principles of justice. And I am reminded of what President Obama, when he visited Ghana, said. What Africa needs is strong institutions, not strong men. Unquote. Friends, external dependence and the erosion of confidence, dignity, and determination have diminished people's ability to utilize human, physical, and mental capacities effectively, and to take the initiative for creative options to solve development problems. The challenge to the church is to empower Africans to realize the full potential of their talents and creativity, and to mobilize their contribution to the development and progress of their communities. The African story must be told in the African way and in the language by Africans who are the first-hand experience and exposures to the situation. Most of the stories you hear on CNN and BBC, I must tell you, 90%, 95% are second-hand and third-hand. The African story must be told by the Africans. in the African way and in the African language. The prophetic voice of the African church must address the African realities on the ground. Some of these issues are bad politics and politicians, foreign domination, especially the economy, the economic injustice in our system, unjust international economic systems, widespread illiteracy and low educational standards, immoral practices, including, of course, tribalism, corruption, dishonesty and laziness, excessive population growth, human-caused environmental crisis. We were told by the CEO during his review, speak the truth of the gospel, speak out against injustice in our society. This is a challenge to all of us. The voice of leadership. The noted Nigerian writer, Chinua Achebe, author of the novel Things Fall Apart, describes these problems in one word, and that is leadership. In his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, 1983, he argues, the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. There is nothing basically wrong with the Nigerian character. There is nothing wrong with the Nigerian land, or water, or air, or anything else. Nigerian problem is the unwillingness and inability of its leaders to rise to the responsibility, to the challenge of personal example, which are hallmarks of true leadership. He concludes the chapter by saying, we have lost 20th century. Are we bent on seeing that our children also lose the 21st century? God forbid. What Achebe says of Nigeria is equally true of most African countries. We have lost the 20th century. Are we bent on seeing our children also lose the 21st century? God forbid. Where is the prophetic voice of the church? African leadership must work to put people at the heart of development, must seek community-driven development, must work to protect natural environment, must promote good governance and fight against corruption, must respect rule of law and follow the principles of probity and accountability. From where I'm coming from, my brothers and sisters, if you look at the body rivers, the rivers in our country, God-given sweet rivers that we could go and fetch and drink at any time, clean waters, have become messy because of illegal mining, the galamsey. Where is the prophetic voice? In the last analysis, when I listened to the chairman of Ghana Water Company trying to give some analysis, how much they spend in treating waters. Of course, they have to add the cost to the people. And the more chemicals they add, the more dangerous it is to the human health. Where are we now? And thus will lead me to my next section: financial sustainability and mission of the church. Friends, after a series of consultations held with bishops from across the continent of Africa in 2008 and 2009, Trinity Church Wall Street in New York gathered a working theme composed of 6 bishops from across the continent to make recommendations on how Trinity Church Wall Street could support efforts towards financial sustainability. The work of the team is contained in a document, It Can Be Done: Reflections on Financial Sustainability and Stewardship, the Future of the Anglican Communion in Africa. For this group, sustainability is a process through which an organization would draw resources, investment, ownership, security, and stewardship for the good of the community in the present and for the future, for the financial support of its mission, unquote. The church, according to these bishops, must think about ways of sustaining itself. And this is what I want to sell to Uspg. The church must think about the ways of sustaining itself because, 1, there is a need for the church to develop a sustainable financial base and effective grant management. 2, the needs of the church have increased far in excess of traditional giving in the local churches. The social needs are proving to be increasingly above the ability of the church to cope. 4, there is the need for the church to be financially self-sufficient instead of depending on donor support, which has a fixed time frame. Prophetic voice of the church in Africa must therefore ensure that, 1, donor funding are channeled through the financing of sustainable economic projects supported by a vision and sound business plan, instead of it being put in the diocesan operational cost. I don't think Africa today needs money for its operational cost. We need money to invest, and out of it, do mission. Hand to mouth is not good for the church in Africa. 2, prophetic voice in Africa must be bold to enter into wise partnership with businesses, investors, and other organizations with similar objectives, whether in spirit of corporate social responsibility or for the development of properties. Again, prophetic voice in Africa must engage churches to venture into economic activities and to take advantage of the business skills of its members in conducting an environment scan to establish its own strengths and weaknesses in order to establish whatever environmentally induced threats and opportunities. Prophetic voice in Africa must lead churches in Africa to develop capacity in strategic planning, resource mobilization, and in effective management of its resources. Prophetic voice again in Africa must engage donor partners like Uspg to travel along with the African churches on the road, not just to self-propagating, self-governing, but also self-sustaining. What the church in Africa needs now is not aid to take care of operational cost, but financial empowerment to enable them to do mission and provide ministry to the people. In other words, prophetic voice in Africa must advocate for true and mutual partnership, for business, for financial sustainability, for mission and ministry in Africa. Suffice it to say, my brothers and sisters, the partnership has always been the strength of the Anglican Communion. What we need is partnership, not mother-child, not father-son, not giver and receiver, not superior and whatever. We want partnership to be on equal footing. So if the church in the global north, for whatever reason, is ahead of the church in the global south, well, don't wait for us and say, come. You should rather come and be a part with us. Hold us, and let's move together. That is what we need. Don't give us money to pay our operational cost. We don't need hand to mouth. We need money to sustain and enable us to do mission. We have to do mission. Africans must take charge of Africa. But of course, we will need your support. But not for you to dictate, to tell us. See, that's a problem even in the politics, in the world of economics. World Bank will give grant or loan, and the policies are determined. What to do is drafted in New York. So whether it affects the people or not is another game and a different ball game. Let us be partners and not master-servant relationship. Prophetic witness is God authorizing, mandating, enabling, capacitating, and deputizing a chosen voice to speak on behalf of God. The voice of the people, they say, is the voice of God. To this extent, the voice is not limited to that of ordained ministry alone. It is a responsibility of every Christian with a Christ-like conscience to sound the prophetic voice. The good news is that African story must start with one voice of missionary and visionary. One that moves Africa from being beggars to becoming competitors. One that dreams of Africa coming of age and Africa beyond aid in the true spirit of mutual responsibility and interdependence. Let him leave you with 3 issues to ponder over. And I must say, for the trustees and management of Uspg. 1, the concept of partnership. The concept of partnership connotes equality in terms of the beginnings of the partners and the partnership relationship. It's not about how much equity you have for you to contribute. If we're talking about partnership, how can we start and move on together? After all, in the theology of incarnation, the doctrine of incarnation. So it's God who became one like us. God coming to where we were and bringing us up. The divinity taking part of humanity in order for humanity to share in the divinity. Come to us, but don't come with that spirit of supremacy. Come with a spirit of partnership. We must start the journey together and complete together. It is only in that one becomes a true, dependable partner. Why are we saying this? I'll tell you in my third point. 2, capacity building. I want to commend Uspg, because having been a dean of the seminary of St. Nicholas, Cape Coast, for 12 years before becoming a bishop, I know the Uspg contribution in capacity building and leadership to the church in Africa, or in that part of Africa where I come from, Ghana. Why? Because leadership is key in the concept of sustainability. Resources will have to be managed and invested. It takes people who are trained with the relevant exposures to be able to take bold decisions that will grow and broaden the resources of the African church. 2 key areas of training for me are paramount: financial management and investment, and project management. Look, no matter how much you give, if we don't have the people, the capacity is not there to manage, it will go waste. So think about leadership and capacity building. And lastly, my third point, and I'll finish, timing of support. Timing of support. And here I'm referring to Festina loan. You can help solve a problem when you begin your support or the support scheme from the foundation or the root of the situation. You see, Festina loan, as we understand, is to complete, right? It's the third stage. How do I get to the third stage for you to come? Because I have to survive. I have to struggle to start, move to the next, and then for Festina to come. What about if I don't get there? What will become of the Festina loan? The timing of support. If your support comes only at the end, then it is better as nothing. Because how do I get there? How do I get there? It's better as nothing. If you only want to help me at the end of the road, then you would have to cost me more. You will have cost me more harm than good. It is like leaving me to survive before you come to support. What about if I'm not able to get there? What will become of the Festina loan? Let us begin working together and to end to the glory of God. Thank you.